This is a review of Homework 10. Homework 10 only involved doing one question. So here it is, question number 12. Okay, so question number 12 was each of the following tables of means shows the results of a study using a factorial design. Assuming that any differences are statistically significant, for each table, A and B make two bar graphs showing the results. In one graph grouping the bars according to one variable, and in the other graph grouping the bars according to the other variable. So that's basically what A and B are. And then C, indicate which main effects, main effects and interaction, if any, are found. D, describe the meaning of the pattern of what the meaning of the pattern means. That is, any main effect or interaction effects or lack thereof in words. All right, so here we have the measured variable is degree of envy of another person's success. And so we're looking to see whether that degree of envy related to a great or a small success, and then whether that other person that we're potentially envious of is a friend or a stranger. So I'm looking at the table. What the results say is that the amount of envy we feel when we have a friend who has a great success is 8. Okay, so however envy is measured in this case, whatever those units are, but 8 is the highest number here. So we can say we have the most envy when a friend has a great success. That number is 8. We actually have less envy when that friend has a small success. And then when a stranger has a great success, envy is only 1. And when a stranger has a small success, envy is 4. So what we're going to determine from these cell means is we're going to calculate marginal means, and then we're going to determine whether there is a main effect of whether the other person is a friend or a stranger. So basically whether there is a main effect for status of others, and then whether there's a main effect for degree of success, and then whether there is an interaction between degree of success and status of the other. Okay, so the first thing, the part A and B asked you to create a graph, and to create it both ways. So let's make sure I did this. Yeah, good. All right, so the first thing that we're graphing here on the vertical axis is degree of envy, because that's the measured variable or the outcome variable or the dependent variable. Those terms are used more or less interchangeably. So the bars here represent status of other, either the friend or the stranger, and then the two groupings represent whether it's a great success or a small success. So all I've done is just applied those cell means to the bars, and you'll see that the height of the bars corresponds exactly to the cell means in the table. So if you go friend, great success, friend in blue, great success, you'll notice that there's that 8, whereas a friend that had a small success was the 5. And then we've got the 1 and the 4, okay? So, just from a graph, graphs are very nice visual representations of data because they allow you to pick out patterns pretty easily. And in particular, before we go on to actually calculate the marginal means and try to determine whether there's main effects or interactions, I can already tell that there is an interaction effect here. Because recall that one way to determine whether there's an interaction is to say, well, are the findings of, or is the effect of one variable consistent at the level of another variable? Or is there a difference in the differences? Is another way to look at it. Here we can see there's clearly a difference in the differences. So the effect of feeling envious of either a success of a friend or a stranger really depends on whether it's a great success or a small success, and that's not consistent. So we could say it appears we're more envious of a friend, but we're much more envious when it's a great success than a small. So the amount that we're envious is not consistent across the two different sizes of success. So again, just to say, by looking at this graph, we should already know that we have an interaction effect. And this is just another way to look at it. So here we've got, and the reason that I think the textbook and the homework problem has you do it these two different ways is because it can be more versus less intuitive to display a pattern of results one way versus the other. So for some people, this graph makes a lot more sense. For other people, this graph makes a lot more sense. For me, this graph makes more sense because for me, I can say, okay, when I'm judging a friend, this is a great versus a small success for a friend, or when I'm thinking about my envy of a stranger, this is great versus this is small. And the interesting thing here too is you can also see the interaction, and we have something called a reversal pattern. So when I'm considering my friends, I'm more envious of a great success. But when it comes to strangers, I'm more envious of a small success, which is kind of weird with this data. So that's kind of a crossover effect or a reversal effect. But again, that indicates that we've got an interaction going on. All right, so indicate which effects, main and interaction, if any, are found. Describe the meaning and patterns of words. Okay. So we have a main effect for status of others, and we can say that on average, people feel more envy towards friends than they do strangers, mean 6.5 versus a mean of 2.5. Let's go back and see where we got those numbers. So in order to see whether there's a main effect of status of other, we have to just calculate the marginal means. So the marginal mean of 8 and 5 is 6.5, okay, which we just get by adding 8 plus 5 is 13. 13 divided by 2 is 6.5. Marginal mean for stranger is 2.5. We got that by just averaging 1 and 4. 1 plus 4 is 5, divided by 2 is 2.5. Okay, so 6.5 and 2.5 are the marginal means associated with friends and strangers. Okay, so we can say that overall, on average, we feel more envy towards friends than we do strangers. So yes, there is a main effect. However, there's no main effect for the degree of success. On average, people feel the same envy if other people have a great success versus a small success. Okay, let's take a look at that. What's the marginal mean here? 4.5. Why? Because we're going to average 8 and 1. And so if we sum those together and divide by 2, we're going to get 4.5. Eyeballing this, we can see that the mean here is 4.5, but we'll just do the math. 5 plus 4 is 9, divided by 2 is 4.5. Okay, so same marginal mean. So on average, the main effect is that there is no main effect of degree of success. Okay, but we know that in some ways is qualified. Okay, because the overall effect is that we don't feel more versus less envy if there's a great versus small effect. But we know that that's qualified by the interaction. Okay, so there is an interaction, and what we can say is that overall there was no effect of the size of success. Right, this main effect, no difference, non-significant main effect for the degree of success. But that's not really completely true because it really depends on friendship status. We can say that with friends, people were more envious of great successes versus small successes, right? And then these are those cell means. However, with strangers, people were less envious of great successes versus small successes, 1 versus 4. So that's the way that I chose to break down the interaction. You'll recall from the lecture that you can kind of decompose or break down the interaction in a couple different ways, and that's one. Okay, the other way that you can decompose or break that down is that you can look to see whether the main effect of status of others, which is that we feel more envious towards friends and strangers, whether that 4-point effect such that we're on average 4 points more envious of friends and strangers, whether that is true regardless of the size of the effect. And what you'll find is, of course, it's not. Okay, so that's how we did that. That's how I did that first one. All right, the next one is The measured variable is engagement in the activity. So how engaged people are when they do different activities or tasks. And so these are children's tasks, of course, measuring a child's engagement in the activity. And so the situation would be playing alone versus with a playmate. And then there's two different types of activities, playing with blocks or playing dress up. So looking at the cell means, okay, and you can imagine some study in psychology where you've got researchers and psychologists that are observing kids actually doing these activities and playing. And so you've got multiple um, children that go into this mean, right? So like there's multiple observations that produce this mean. So it means not every single child is going to show this level of engagement, but what we're um, showing here in the table is the average level of engagement. All right. So the average level of engagement in this study, let's say, is that children showed engagement of 4.5 when playing with blocks alone. However, they showed engagement of 2.5 when playing dress up alone. Okay, so more engagement by 2 points when they played blocks versus dress up. However, you can see that pattern reverses. So with a playmate, engagement is 2.5 with blocks, but 4.5 with dress up. All right. So here's what that graph looks like, one of the ways to graph it. And so the bars are the activities, blocks versus dress up. And then the two groupings are the situations, so either alone or with playmate. And again, here too, we can see just visually, we're going to have an interaction because we have this reversal effect. Okay, so alone, blocks more engaging than dress up, but with a playmate, dress up more engaging than blocks. Okay, so another quick little heuristic for determining whether there's an interaction effect is to just connect the top of the bars with a line. Right, so if you would just draw a line from the top of this bar to the top of this bar, and then do the same, draw a line from the top of this bar to the top of this bar, anytime you have lines that will intersect, as in they are not parallel, you will have an interaction effect. And that's a very useful heuristic when you're reading a research paper or perhaps on an examination. And this looks almost exactly the same, right? But we've got here, what I do before. Here we've got the situation are the bars, and then the activity is the grouping. Okay, and again, it's just really the way that you graph it. There's two possible ways, and when presenting research results, you would pick one or the other, and the one that you pick has to do with what do you think best communicates the point that you're trying to make, like what is more intuitive for an audience. But this homework is just designed to show that you can do it either way. All right, so now what we want to do is indicate which effects there are, if any, and then describe the meaning and the pattern of words. So the main effect for situation on average is the same amount of engagement when playing alone or with a playmate. Okay, so recall that the cell means are 4.5 and 2.5. So when you average those together, you get a marginal mean of 3.5 when playing alone or with a playmate. So we'd say that this should read no main effect for situation, because on average we get the same amount of engagement when playing alone or with a playmate. There's also no main effect for activity type. So on average, there's the same amount of engagement for blocks and dress up. Okay, but as we expected, there is an interaction. One way to look at it is to say overall there's no effect for activity type, but that's not really true, because we can say that to say that there's no effect it really depends on the situation, because when we look at the simple effects, there are definitely simple effects, because we can say that when playing alone, okay, so at the level of the alone level of that situation variable, there's higher engagement for blocks than dress up. However, with a partner, the pattern reverses and there's less engagement for blocks versus dress up. Okay, so the reason that overall we have no main effective situation and no main effective activity type is the pattern basically reverses, and so it kind of nullifies. So that's an interesting, and actually in psychological research, or just, I shouldn't say that, but we can just say research in general and statistics in general, this is known as a crossover interaction because it makes that perfect X when you graph the tops of the bars. All right, and then third one is we now have a 3x2 design. Okay, so we've got type of ballet goer. I had to look at that a couple times before I realized that it said ballet goer. Okay, so type of ballet goer has 3 levels: regular, sometime, or novice. And then the type of program that the ballet goer is going to view is either they go to see Swan Lake or they go to see a modern ballet. So we've got a 3x2 design resulting in 6 different cells in the research design, 6 different cell means. And what we have here as the measured variable is the intensity of attention. So you have to wonder if this was really a psychologist that was trying to study this. The types of kind of observational study that they would do is kind of be looking at the you'd have to know who is a regular versus sometime versus novice ballet goer and find some way to measure the intensity of attention that they're paying attention to these different programs. Okay, so presumably higher numbers mean higher level of intensity. Okay, and again, we can make, I think the choices of how to graph become a little bit more salient here. So here, we're going to group the type of ballet according to the 3 different types of ballet goers. So here's a regular ballet goer, here's somebody who sometimes attends the ballet, and then novice. And then you can see this was the more intuitive way, I guess, for me, among the regular ballet goers. They're paying greater attention to Swan Lake versus modern. People that go sometimes pay equal amount of attention, and people that are novice also more attention to Swan Lake than modern. Here's the other way to graph it. Here we'd have 2 groupings and then 3 bars because the bars have to represent the 3 different types of ballet goers. And so what we see here is with Swan Lake, we have regular, sometime, and novice. Okay, their attention, intensity of attention plotted, and we can see that there's a decline from regular to novice. And then it would otherwise be a similar pattern if this sometimes bar was at this level, but it's not. So we have, here's the modern ballet. People that go sometimes pay just as much attention to the ballet as the regular attendees, but people that are novice attendees pay less attention. All right, and so you can think about, are we seeing consistent or different effects here? And these are, again, different effects. We don't have a general pattern. It's difficult to speak in generalities that the effects are always consistent. So yet again, we're going to have an interaction effect. Okay, so there was a main effect for type of program. So when you calculated the marginal means, you should have gotten that the overall mean, or the marginal mean, for Swan Lake was 15, and the modern program was only 11.67. And so because those marginal means are different, we can say that there's greater attention. And again, in interpreting the pattern, like what it actually means, we want to interpret it in a way that somebody that is not a statistician or not a researcher can understand, because it's just a simple statement that anybody can understand, that ballet goers pay greater attention to Swan Lake than modern ballet on average. There's also a main effect for the type of ballet goer. On average, the results found that there's greater attention or greater intensity of attention among regular compared to sometime compared to novice. Okay, so those are just averaging across the type of ballet. Okay, so not taking into consideration whether it is Swan Lake or modern, we've got the average for regular ballet goers sometime, and then novice. Okay, and then what we can say is that there is an interaction. Overall, there was an effect for the type of program, such that on average, ballet goers had greater attention to Swan Lake than modern by 3.33 points. Okay, that's just the difference between 15 and 11.67. So we can say that on average, there's this average effect for type of program, such that the ballet goers paid more attention to Swan Lake than modern by 3.33 points. However, this effect of 3.33 points was not consistent, okay, because both regular and novice ballet goers had greater attention to Swan Lake than modern by 5 points, but the ballet goers that attend sometimes gave the same amount of attention. Okay, so this 3.33, this overall effect of 3.33 points, not consistent. Regular and novice paid more attention by 5 points, but the sometimes folks, they gave equal amounts of attention. So that main effect is not consistent, and whenever we have a main effect that is not consistent across the levels of the other independent variable, we have an interaction effect. Okay. This problem was not assigned, but I think it's great practice to study for the exam. So I'll just go over it. So it said, in this study, English-speaking participants were instructed to try to read a paragraph for a half hour in one of 3 languages that they did not understand. They read the paragraph after either being told the main idea of the paragraph, told the main idea of the first sentence only, or not told anything about the meaning. They were given the translations of some words. The researchers then measured how many of the other words that they could correctly translate. Okay? And then the following chart shows the design. And then so for each of the possible patterns of results, make up a set of cell means, figure out the marginal means, and then make a bar graph of the result. You could skip that part. But what it says is, so we're going to look at, where is it? Oh, it's not there. I took it away. But basically, you could think about a 3x3 table. Okay, and in this example, there was 3 different languages. Okay, and then there was 3 different languages, and then there's 3 different experimental conditions. Okay, in one condition there was the main idea of the paragraph. In the second condition there was the main idea of the first sentence, and then in the third condition there was no information at all about meaning. So, and when you look at this problem in the book, there's this 3x3 design, 6 different cells, and your goal is to then try to come up with that there's a main effect for language but no other main effect or interaction, main effect for knowledge of meaning, that's whether they were given the paragraph, the sentence, or nothing, and no other main effect, main effects but no interaction, main effect and an interaction but no main effect for knowledge of meaning, both main effects and interaction. Okay, so the idea here is that you just try to put in your own numbers to illustrate these main effects, and that's I think that's a really good way to study, because if you can do that, you really demonstrate that you understand the main effects and the interaction. So, all right, hopefully this gave you a sense of if you did question 12 correct. Again, there's different ways to decompose or explain an interaction, and so if you didn't do it the exact same way that I did, that's fine. But you should have taken an approach. You should have at least identified correctly the main effects and the interactions.